Hello and welcome, dear friends. I'm glad to continue our discussion with you and share with you my past. As you know, the reason why I'm doing it is because I feel compelled. In fact, I feel urged to come and share the story of my past in the hope that perhaps some people will be moved to stand up and speak up against anti-Semitism, which is rising and which is troubling throughout the world. And therefore, I hope you will take my life experience into consideration and realize that anti-Semitism is not just a word. It's a call to murder, plain and simple. And it must be stopped as quickly as possible. So let me continue where I left off last time. I left off as my father was taken away from me, and then as we received the reports from Polish people, 2 days later, on a Friday, they were killed. They were taken out from the courthouse of Novovarodok, and were taken to a field nearby where they were forced to dig their own grave, a mass grave, and then all 120 people were shot dead. That is the report we have, and as a matter of fact, according to this report, we set the date in my family to say Kaddish, the memorial prayer for my father. My father was an integral part of my life. As a child, I was extremely attached to my father. And this parting, the embrace which he gave me just before he was taken away, stayed with me for the rest of my life. It accompanied me later on, many years later actually, as I lived already as a mature man, as a rabbi, and I came to visit my uncle in Kfar Saba. He was dying, to say goodbye to him. I embraced him, and he embraced me and held on to me tight and wouldn't let me go. And that embrace recalled again the embrace for my father. Years later, my cousin, the only cousin from my mother's side, first cousin, died in a hospital in Ann Arbor. I came to see how he feels and say goodbye to him. We parted, and he held me tight. And again, I felt that event when my father was holding me. And when I was younger, and my children grew up, and I took them to summer camp and said goodbye to them, and I had my oldest son in my arms, I remembered the embrace of my father. That embrace kept me through years. And for many years, I was hoping, looking forward, someday he will return and I will meet him. His death was never, in a way, accepted by me. And so we went on with life without my father, my mother, myself, and two little sisters. My grandfather, my father's father, was alive, and he was with us. He'd come in and go away to his son, and we stayed together. I would like to cover the time from this 23rd day of July 1941 to February 22nd, 1942. We covered the summer and the great part of the winter. During this time, many things happened. Gypsies were rounded up and killed in our town. People were rounded up and sent out to work in a labor camp in a nearby town called Dvorets. People were killed in the street. People were killed because they were accused of communism. In the meantime, the Jewish people was beginning to kind of develop some kind of organized structure. The Jewish community was led by a Judenrat, whom the Germans appointed. There was no rabbi. The rabbi was still left in our town because the rabbi was ransomed from the 120 people who were sent away. He was among them, actually. And he was ransomed by the Jewish community, by the Judenrat, and he was saved. He was killed later on. When this time, the following happened to us specifically. One day, my mother went outside the house and she went beyond our big barn, a silo, and she began to cry, and everybody was upset what was going on. She discovered a hole under the barn, leading into the barn, and everything in the barn, where my father hid all our valuables, which I mentioned with the man Vanya, his friend, was taken away, stolen. There nobody knew about this except this Vanya. And all our good things were taken away. One way or another, perhaps it was divine. It should so happen because the Germans, as it were confiscating and forced the Jewish people to hand over all their valuables in silver and gold and furs and so forth. And many gave it for hiding to their neighbors, who in turn, in order to get possession of what they were hiding and keeping for their Jewish friends and neighbors, they killed the Jewish neighbors in order they should have the valuables with them. So that was a great loss to us. How we lived, I don't even remember how. Apparently we must have had enough produce from the land, enough produce to eat. Maybe we still were buying from our neighbors, from the farmers and so forth. And that was one part of it. A little later, somewhere around September, my mother gave birth to a baby brother. She was pregnant when my father was taken away. Excuse me. We couldn't even have circumcision for him. I remember everybody was talking. There was no mohel in town. And so he was not circumcised for a while. A little later, apparently the Jewish community smuggled in, when we were already later in the ghetto, a mohel, a person who does ritual circumcision, to circumcise a whole group of little children who were yet not circumcised. They gave my little brother the name of Yechiel. Yechiel means God live, or God will make him live. Yechiel is lived by God. Then I was sent away to a farm. A friend of ours, a friend of my uncle, my uncle's wife and two daughters went to live on the farm to avoid potential attacks and killings in the city by the German soldiers, and their collaborators, among whom were White Russian, Polish, Latvian, Lithuanians, militia, and they worked together with the Germans. So I was sent away to this farmer, and I stayed on the farm from that summer till around late in the winter. And every once in a while I would come back to town. The farmer's son was called Sergei, and the farmer was called Ivan, I think. And I must tell you, to this day, I have only love and affection and gratitude. Sergei treated me like a brother. And I had to pretend that I was a Christian boy, a friend of the family from another village, so the neighboring friends should not begin to raise questions. Who's this little boy hiding here? He must be a Jew. And then the farmer would be punished, he would be killed. And so we had to go under this pretense. And this was going on for months, till well into the winter. And every once in a while, the farmer would take me into town when he would go to town to purchase or to sell some things. And I would visit my mother for a day, and at night I would go back with him to the farm. I remember when we were traveling at night, it was early in the morning in the winter, and he was taking long woods, trees actually, an entire tree that was lying on small little sleds and pulled by a horse. And I was sitting on this big tree, holding on not to fall up, and how I used to be afraid because in the middle of the night when, as it begins to get light, you see the shadows and the trees look like human beings. I thought people were all over there. And it frightened me. And then suddenly I realized they're not people, they're human beings. They're trees, and I was pacified. So it was going on back and forth until finally it was too dangerous for me to remain on the farm because the farmer couldn't keep on explaining what happened, where this little boy came suddenly to live on the farm. It was bad enough he was hiding my aunt and my two cousins. And so I left the farm, remember, and returned back to stay with my mother in our town. This was going on for the time till February 22nd, 1942. At that time, the Jewish people were forced to go into the ghetto. And one day, during that day in the morning, we had to start moving in and see where to go. Jewish people had to find a place where to go. The whole ghetto was limited. And so we'll continue the story of the moving from our private home, from our own possessions, into the house of my uncle. Until then, I wish you all the best. If you like the program, if you don't like the program, please respond. We hope you join us in a common effort to combat anti-Semitism and join the people united against anti-Semitism. Give us a thumb up and we'll answer you. Thank you very much. God bless you.